and digital are the two main enablers for each of the society. And I'm thankful that Catherine will afterwards jump up and tell us a bit more about what we specifically do on school connectivity. So that we start at the schools, and from the schools hopefully reach out to the communities. Next slide, please. I have here some real citations. And like the person I met in 2019 on the left side, he is the, I've forgotten his name, he is the mayor of Ambash in the south of the Serengeti. And he has thrown away his weapon. And he says, you know, the only thing I need is a mobile phone. And then I said, but guy, you don't have a mobile network here. And he said, it's true. But once a week, I actually come to a place where I have a mobile network. And then I can do my WhatsApp exchange and get the messages in. And that reminded me of maybe the concept of internet everywhere is the wrong concept when it comes to maybe we just have to first enable a hotspot in every community such that people can come to that community, get the internet, get used to the information, get the training at that hotspot, find the information which is relevant for them, and with that one then bring up the demand of saying, we want more. Next slide, please. Take the next one, sorry. In the interest of time, and the next one. You see the slides all afterwards, so you can go through it. But what we had really worked on is bringing reality to the ground. When I say we solved the challenge of access, is that we in Serengeti, in Silla, we demonstrated that we can reach out more than 20 kilometers to reach a mobile network and create an info spot. And together with Barak and Robert, we are piloting some new access technologies where we can even reach out maybe 30 kilometers, such that the distance to the network, where you don't see anything, isn't really there when you create that info spot. Because we built this mast, and there in Isasi it took us 90 minutes. 90 minutes to connect a community. And the cost of the equipment is like $350. Is the antenna, a Raspberry Pi, and a router. Antenna about $150, the router about $70, the Raspberry Pi around $100, $110, depending on the version. And I was very happy when Barak told me this morning that Raspberry Pi is going to produce in Kenya. I'm really looking forward that the hardware will come from Kenya. The mindset, the content will come from the collaboration which we have here, both on health, on innovation, on empowerment of the society. Next slide, please. So we had a fantastic health study in Tanzania where we provided digital health videos on cystic sarcosis, on TB, on HIV, and on anthrax. And what we have seen is tremendous knowledge uptake. We had like an increase from 10% to 70% correct answers in cystic sarcosis. The number for, what was the next one? Sorry. For TBC didn't look like that much, but it was from 61% to 91%. And if you reach more than 90% correct answers on TBC, you really have achieved something. And HIV/AIDS was from 78 to 94%. So really extremely good numbers. And even after 12 months, where we had the info spots, we still had more than 53% correct answers on cystic sarcosis. And that is like, wow, half of the answers are still correct. Next slide, please. So that actually brought me to the point that, A, how can we bring health education to schools? How can we bring the necessary ground education so that every girl, every boy knows it and carry it home to their parents? And at the same time, bringing the costs for the installation down by basically having the community helping us to say that I want to have my school connected. Next slide, please. So Catherine will afterwards jump in, so I don't tell you too much here about that work, where we started with 10 schools, then 50 schools in Tanzania. Now it's 300 schools in the next 6 months. And by 2024, we hope to have connected 1,500 schools. That means 1.3 million students. Next slide, please. And here are some pictures where everyone helps connecting the mast. Next one. Where we have communities in 14 countries in Africa who have approached us. It was Gambia who was there last week, who said, Joseph, we ship the equipment, you configure. So that's the work when I come home on Monday. Next slide, please. And on the sustainability, the biggest elephant in the room. We don't need more technologies, but we need technologies which still work. And I'm happy that Eden will soon jump in and tell us what he has done in his community to ensure that the internet is sustainable. Because in A, it needs to be affordable. B, we need to see the value of the $20 we are paying as a community for the internet access and what that means to get out. Next slide, please. So I want to really point back to the basic start of it. I had the pleasure of kicking out some of the godfathers of the internet out from the office. Paul Spilling was working together with Ingvar Lund and Vincent to our building in Norway. So it was first our building in Norway at Kjeller, and then London got connected. And that one, when Paul showed me this picture of the gold medal of the internet, I really felt, okay, now we have to help so that everyone is out there. Next slide, please. And what we really need to change, and those are the last things, from the academic point of view, we really need to question the existing statements. When it comes to 5G, what we see is 5G is a technology for the telecom operators to make money. But 5G has also a fantastic technology called network slicing, which we could easily use for saying, here is a slice for access to information on the internet. And what I want to trigger your mind is really asking you, shouldn't we apply the model of the road? Yes, we need someone building the roads. But once the roads are built, pedestrians and cyclists have free access to the road. Now, if we ask ourselves, what are the digital pedestrians and what are the digital cyclists? Isn't that text and pictures? Isn't money made by broadband, by Bollywood, Premier League, and all that kind of stuff? Or as me as a boy, I say, give a man $1 and it goes for sex and drugs and rock and roll. So it is really there where the money is. And the little digital pedestrians and digital cyclists, they don't really use bandwidth. Next slide, please. So number one, Internet Lite. Give free access to everyone. Number two, really perform for us as the universities. Perform the change and say that we as universities, we should engage ourselves to connect schools, to get part of this 5G spectrum, build our 5G on our research towers, and from there on go out to the schools and connect, and bring our students to have practical knowledge. And like Catherine, you can perhaps afterwards jump in to, who was that who is now working in Zanzibar? And we had students from University of Dar es Salaam building the regional competence center, configuring the devices, and he went out afterwards out to work, and the company was so surprised that he had more knowledge than most of the other employees, because he had configured all his work on the MikroTik devices. So next slide. In conclusion, just skip that one. In conclusion, what I want to point out is when we really want to change, A, we should use our critical thinking to ask whether the current paradigm of the internet, based on we are consumers, and the internet is an internet of sex, drugs, and rock and roll, and not of value creation and empowerment, whether that isn't the big elephant in the room which we need to change. And then say, how can we change that one by introducing digital pedestrians and digital cyclists with free access for them? And what we need to do is A, having the universities to use our CANET, our TANET, our National Research and Education Networks, Ubuntu Alliance, to extend that to schools. B, we can then use the schools to connect the communities. And we can then invite the mobile operators, of course, to be part of that game, because we empower their future customers. And by that, Catherine and Eden, can you come up? Eden? So thanks for listening. What Catherine first does is she will give us a short intro of, well, she got the big reward yesterday. Sorry, the big reward yesterday on what was it? The most honorable contribution to school connectivity in Tanzania. Congratulations, Catherine. Tell us more.
Good morning, everyone. So my name is Catherine Richard Kimambo. I work as a senior advisor at Basic Internet Foundation, but also I founded an NGO called African Child Projects. So on my background, I'm not a techie personnel. Actually, I studied international relations and diplomacy. And I think that's one of the advantages, because I'm working on the tech sector, and it's mostly technical stuffs that you get to hear when you attend these discussions. And to me, I basically ask Professor Noel every time, how does this translate to someone who, to the politician or the policy makers, or to people who do not have tech background? How do they understand when you say the model of the road? How do they understand the policies that are there, which it translates to digitalization and the likes? So in discussions like this, I see that we mostly leave behind the most important group, who are the ones creating the policies that affect most of the areas that we work on. I work on a project called the School Connectivity Project, where we connect schools to internet. It's one of the I would say we cater for SDG number 4, which is equal quality education for all. But now the sector is integrated as it is. You have different players in the sector. You have MNOs, you have academic institutions, we have CSOs. We work on a multi-sectoral partnership together with all of them. So in our operations, we try and see how do we appeal to everyone who we are working with. So if I am to speak on the school connectivity as a getaway to connecting everyone or connecting the community as a whole, the School Connectivity Project started in 2021 after we saw the need. I think it was after COVID-19 had hit, and now it's when the government really saw the need to connect schools in rural areas, because there was a big disconnect or the digital divide between schools in urban areas, since they were able to follow up on studies online, and schools in rural areas which were completely shut out. So I think that was then the government really saw the need to connect schools. And from then on, we've had multiple discussions with different players on the importance of connectivity, the importance of not only providing access, because before when we spoke of connectivity, it was only about access. But there are key issues that come after connectivity. These people who we are connecting as students, do they have the right skills? Do they have the right content to consume when they go online? Do we have all the key players on the table to discuss common issues, or for us to have a common voice when we speak of connectivity. So these 4 issues are the ones that informed the project to ensure that what happened in the past when people spoke of connectivity, the challenges that they face are the ones that we are answering when we design the school connectivity project. So there's supposed to be a video. I think the technical team are working on it. You could see the video of what we do on the ground, the technologies that we use, and how we're able to cater for connectivity, content, skills for teachers and students, and also an integrated approach to bring all the key players, including the ministries, the mobile network operators, academic institutions. We are able to harness the knowledge that is available on academic institutions in terms of establishing competence centers for us to work with them hand on hand on training, configurations, capacity building for teachers on the ground. So this has been not 1 month's project. I would say this has been like a collective effort to try and bring everyone online, and this has proven to work. Eden over here will tell you more. He's our digital friend. We're even working with CSOs, which are available in the regions that we are in. So the school connectivity is in 20 regions, and we are a team of 6 to 10 people. We can't be everywhere at the same time. That's why we work with everyone on the whole value chain, including CSOs registered on the ground, academic institutions, and everyone coming together to ensure that we are bringing everyone online. But I will share just a few key points when it comes to when we speak of school connectivity as a gateway to community networks. What I've noticed is that project ownership is key, because most of the time when we have ideas around connectivity and we are just sitting here discussing, but the people on the ground, how do we make sure that we involve them? How do they understand the whole process of how can connectivity benefit them as a whole? So that's where the project ownership comes in. How do they feel involved? How do they feel empowered to even build their own networks, to even create their own content? So I think for me, the first thing when we discuss on any project, it's project ownership. Because as we're sitting here, most of us could be from the academic sectors. I've seen most of professors and doctors, but the people on the ground, I think the likes of me and Eden are usually missing in these conversations. And most of the time we are lost, even hearing papers being presented, and we're like, how does this translate to us? How do we understand what is being said? How does it translate to someone in rural areas, to a student somewhere in rural Tanzania who wants to apply maybe for university in Rwanda? Do they even know that you can study the same rate here that you're paying for a fee, you can pay the same in Rwanda, the same in Kenya, the same in Uganda? Most of those are not known, I think, for people of our kind. So I think it's about time that we have this integrated approach where everyone comes together, and the matters that concern us, we are also involved in giving out our opinions, in even sharing ideas on how that can be appealing to us. But also, I think it's all about complementing, not competing. I think when we are designing school connectivity projects, there was a lot of, I think, pushback from I wouldn't say MNOs, but when you're designing a program, you'd want it to complement the efforts that are already there. You don't want to reinvent the wheel every time you bring something on the ground. So we tried our best to complement the efforts that were already there by different players before, and we tried to learn from what was already existing and see how we can benchmark from where they left off. And most of, I think most of our programs have been able to bring value because we are able to complement on the efforts that were already there, be it the efforts from MNOs. We are able to show them that with your service, you can bring impact to the education sector. So they see it as a complement to their services. And also, the last but not least is the local government involvement. Most of the time, the policies are created by, I wouldn't say politicians, I would say policy makers. So we have to make sure that they're involved, they understand when we say the model of the road, the ones that Professor Noel usually speak of, creating the road so as pedestrians and cyclists can pass for free. It translates to internet light. Do the politicians understand it when you say the model of the road? How do they harness that and bring it maybe to their policies and regulations? How do they understand these terminologies that we have in terms of digitalization and everything as a whole? So I think in meetings like this, I would really want to see the policy makers there. So as we are able to speak a common language, because as we move from here and go back to our villages or go back to our communities, these are the people who we work with directly, and they don't understand what was being discussed here and how that translates to their work as a whole. So if there will be questions, I'll address them. But first, let me let Eden speak about sustainability of most of our projects and how they've been able to bring the components of project ownership, local government involvement, and even central government. I would dare say that our program was launched by the Minister of Education. This was 2022 February, which showed like the really power of government engagement. It gave us a boost when we spoke about the program anywhere, anytime. Since the Minister of Education is the one who launched it, it gave us like a milestone for us as a whole. So let me welcome Eden.
Hi everybody. My name is Eden Zekeliwa Imba. I'm coming from Katavi, but myself, I need to use Swahili. I know everybody here except yeah. Mimi ni kiongozi wa NGO inaitwa Useve Development Society ambayo iko kijijini kabisa katika mkoa wa Katavi, wilaya ya Mlele, halmashauri ya Mpimbwe, katika kijiji cha Usevya. Pamoja na kuwa kiongozi wa asasi, pia ni mwakilishi wa National Council for Non-Governmental Organization na Kongo. Kwa hiyo ni kiongozi mkubwa wa NGO katika Tanzania hii. Pamoja na yote, taasisi yetu imekuwa ikifanya shughuli nyingi za kijamii. Okay. Yeah. Pamoja na kuwa kiongozi, pia taasisi yetu imekuwa ikifanya kazi kwenye jamii. Tunajishughulisha pia na masuala ya kupambana na maambukizi ya ukimwi, kupambana na malaria, kupambana na mazingira, na kusaidia watoto wanaishi katika mazingira magumu, pamoja na kupambana na haki na unyanyasaji wa kijinsia kwa wanawake na watoto. Tumeweza kupata ufadhili wa taasisi nyingi za kimataifa pamoja na ndani. Tumeweza kufanya kazi na UNDP kwenye mazingira, tumeweza kufanya kazi na IUCN kwenye masuala ya mazingira, tumeweza kufanya kazi na Basic Internet ambayo kiongozi ni Joseph Noel. Tumeweza kufanya kazi na mashirika mengine ambayo yameweza kujibu matokeo au matatizo ya kwenye jamii. Lakini pia tumeweza kufanya kazi na serikali, ofisi ya waziri mkuu, ofisi ya mkuu wa mkoa wa Katavi, pamoja na taasisi za ndani kama vile Foundation for Civil Society. Tumefanya kazi na Women Fund Tanzania. Tunafanya kazi pia na THRDC ambayo inashughulika na masuala ya utetezi wa haki za binadamu. Pamoja na shughuli zote hizo, pia tuligundua kwamba tuna changamoto ya community namna ya kutumia mifumo hii ya internet. Pale ndio tulipoona kuna haja sasa ya kuweza kufikiri njia nzuri ambayo sasa inaonekana tunaweza kwenda nayo na tunaona kuna matokeo mazuri yanajitokeza. Cha kwanza, tulijaribu kuangalia namna ambavyo watoto wa shule za sekondari pamoja na wanafunzi wanaomaliza form 6 wanapohitaji kufanya registration ili waweze kupata mikopo kwenye vyuo vikuu pamoja na kujiunga na vyuo vikuu. Changamoto kwenye vijiji pamoja na halmashauri zetu hazina mfumo rasmi au zina maeneo maalum ambayo yanaweza kuwasaidia vijana hao au watoto hao wakaweza kupata huduma hiyo. Pale ndio tulipoona sasa kumbe kuna haja ya kuona tushirikishe jamii au wadau wengine waweze kutusaidia ili tuweze kufikia au kusolve tatizo hilo. Mara ya kwanza nilipita kwenye simu yangu na kugundua kwamba kuna basic internet. Ndipo nilipoomba kusaidiwa vifaa na huduma ambazo zingeweza kujenga uwezo wa kutoa hiyo huduma. Ndipo nilipompata Professor Jose. Jose ndani ya siku 2, sijui alikuwa ananifahamu au anifahamu, lakini kwa sababu ya kuonyesha tatizo na akaona ni muhimu aweze kusaidia jamii ya Usevya. Lakini jamii ya Usevya pamoja na mahitaji hayo ya watoto, wanafunzi, lakini pia kwenye mifumo yetu ya serikali pia kuna changamoto za internet kwenye mashule pamoja na hospitali. Profesa pia aliweza kupitia basic internet aliweza kusaidia vifaa ambavyo sasa hivi vinasaidia kwenye shule ambazo tuliweza kutoa shule 4 vifaa pamoja na dispensary pamoja na health center ambazo ziko kwenye ile halmashauri. Kwa hiyo wameweza kupata hiyo huduma, lakini pia tuliweza kutafuta wataalamu wa kuweza kuwasaidia wale viongozi wa hizo taasisi waweze kujengea uwezo ili waweze kutoa huduma. Pia tumeweza, kwa sababu taasisi yetu ilikuwa na maktaba pamoja na ukumbi, tumeweza kupata vifaa kutoka UCSAF. UCSAF wameweza kutusaidia kompyuta 5 pamoja na projector kwa ajili ya kufanya shughuli za kutoa elimu ya kompyuta pamoja na jamii kuweza kuangalia dunia inakwendaje na kupata taarifa kupata taarifa mbalimbali. Kwa hiyo tuko kwenye hatua za mwisho kwenye kujenga uwezo wa hicho kituo ambacho kinaitwa Mpimbwe Digital and Education Center. Kwa hiyo tunakaribisha wadau mbalimbali ambao wanaweza kuona au kushirikiana na kituo hicho. Jambo lingine, tumeweza kufanya ushirikiano na mbunge wetu ambaye ni Mheshimiwa Geoffrey Pinda. Wakati tuna process vifaa kutoka Norway, aliweza pia kutusaidia kulipia baadhi ya gharama kuvisafisha kutoka airport na kufikisha nyumbani. Lakini pia halmashauri yetu imeweza kushirikiana, local government authorities ambayo iko kule imeweza pia kushirikiana na sisi kuhakikisha vifaa vyote vinafika. Lakini kwa ujumla wetu pamoja na Catherine, Professor Jose, kupitia taasisi ya Catherine tumeweza kusaidia baadhi ya shule za sekondari zaidi ya 8 kupata vifaa vinavyotoka Vodacom Foundation na kuweza kuvigawa kwenye zile shule na kutoa elimu ya kompyuta. Ingawa mahitaji bado ni makubwa kwenye hizo shule, bado tunahitaji wadau mbalimbali ambao wanaweza kusaidia ili kufikia malengo yetu. Naomba niwasilishe kwa sababu muda ni mfupi. Kama kuna swali lolote tunaomba.
Okay, I see 2 questions in the room. Also for online participants, it's a Q&A session. And as we prepare for that, just to notify you that we are going to have one last panel for this morning session. And we'll still have Professor Noel, Professor Margaret Kaseje, and Dr. Marwa. We'll be looking at funding mechanisms to support impact investment. Otherwise, I will take the first question. It can either be in English or Kiswahili. And then there's another question. There's a question here, Peter. Yes, and then we'll have the second question. Let me also see if we have any online.
Asante sana kwa hiyo presentation nzuri kabisa na huduma ambayo mnatoa. Swali langu nauliza maeneo yenu ya usaidizi ni huko Katavi tu ama mnaweza kusaidia sehemu za shule na mipangilio yenu pia sehemu zingine au ni huko tu? Asante.
Naweza kuendelea na kujibu au anaweza kupasha? Sisi kwa kuwa tuna consortium ya taasisi ya Basic Internet Foundation pamoja na African Chad, pia Vodacom, kumekuwa na huduma hii ikiendelea kwa Tanzania nzima, na tumeinvolve taasisi ambazo zinashughulika na kutoa huduma. Kwa hiyo pia tulifikiria kutumia viongozi wa Kongo katika kila mkoa walioko kwenye mikoa yetu. Ukiwasiliana nao ni rahisi sana kupata hii huduma kwa sababu wao wanafahamu namna mradi unavyotekelezwa. Lakini pia kwa sababu mradi huu una phase 3. Phase ya kwanza ilipita, ya pili ndio tuko mwishoni, na ya 3 iko katika utaratibu ambao tukiweza kuwasiliana na huduma hiyo inaweza kupatikana. Pia Catherine ataongezea kwa hilo.
Sawa. Kama alivyosema mradi una phase 3 na phase ya 3 tunaenda shule 300. Kama baada ya phase ya 3 tutakuwa na ya 4 na ya 5 ambayo ni ya mwisho 2025 tukiwa tuna shule 1500 in total. Kwa hiyo na shule tunapokea maombi ya shule kuunganishwa, lakini kuna vigezo ambavyo utavipata kama you have a school suggestions au nini. Lakini mradi ni huo wa kuunganisha shule na internet. Tunatoa vifaa, tunatoa mafunzo kwa walimu, we integrate content development kwa platforms za content tofauti. Kwa hiyo it's a big program ambayo inaendelea Tanzania kwa udhamini wa Vodacom Tanzania Foundation. Lakini pia tunaongea na MNOs wengine, the likes of Airtel, Tigo, TCL, ili tuweze kufika kila mahali, kwa sababu tunaamini as on their own Vodacom hawako mikoa yote, lakini kwa kuanza tuko mikoa 20 Tanzania. Kwa hiyo Eden ni wa Katavi, lakini kuna digital friend ambao kama Eden kwenye kila mkoa in Tanzania.
Thank you.
I have the question for you, Mr. So I heard very well about what you're doing, and I'm congratulating you. It's a very hard work. But I have a question. Recently in Africa, most likely in our country, we are experiencing a high rate of global change. And how does your organization deal with the environmental change? How do you speak about the environment change? And another question, in recently our years, because you are saying that you are working with the schools, and when you're working with the schools, you're working with youth. They have been more there have been moral erosion. ICT, we can say in one word that ICT is a blessing, but also it has some discusses, and discusses are like, there have been, through ICT, we have experienced a lot of moral erosion. How do you lead these youth or these students to use internet or to use the knowledge of IT wisely for the betterment of their education? How does the organization deal with that? Because I haven't heard you speaking about that.
True.
How do you deal with this challenge? Because we need the youth who are having morals and standards, who can maintain their culture and who can maintain their social status. Because we need reasonable citizens at the future. And it starts by them to be in a good moral ways. How do your organization deal with that?
Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
I basically have got three of your points. The first one was, what do we do with the environment? The second one is, how do we address youth? And the third one is, what do we do with the trustworthy internet? If I start with the environmental stuff, I just came back from a visit to Kigali, where we had the United Nations University to have a climate action school, where we created inputs for the COP27, which is happening these days in Cairo. So what we especially looked out there is, how can digital and energy contribute to climate action? Because of course it was devastating for me to land yesterday in Kilimanjaro airport and see all the areas which should have been green, which should have received water, rain, and seeing there's nothing there. And like yesterday, I've seen the news that Kilimanjaro is probably one of the ones of the 30% of all global glacier areas, which will disappear by 2050. So I can't, from my university point of view, I can't do anything more than contributing with knowledge, but I would be happy to also use the empowerment platform, the school platform, to build up the topics which are of importance for climate action. And that brings me over to the youth. And I had a wonderful discussion with Margaret today. The first thing which we look at is health. So we are currently working on how we can remove the stigma of menstruation, bring information on menstruation out to the schools to help girls to complete the schools and get the knowledge they need to do for a success in their life. The second is to teach boys or inform boys that menstruation is something completely normal. And that brings me to the trust story. As I said, the internet as it is today is the internet of, Bollywood Premier League of making us to consumers. It is driven by commercial interests. Our dear friend Elon Musk, when he now bought Twitter, he did it to make money. And that actually means that how do you make money? You make money by dividing. You make money by hate speech and so on and so forth. So it's all every single one of us who needs to contribute, that we build local knowledge and have that local knowledge available before we jump into the sea. I always say, let's first learn to swim. Let's learn to swim in an environment in our local community where we have content which is safe for each and every one of us. And once we learn to swim, once we learn how the internet is, then we can jump into the big seas where the sharks are. That is the only thing where I can help. I very much appreciate your input, because help us to get the relevant content to the youth at the schools and in the communities.
Maybe if I could also contribute to that aspect. The question is very apt. It calls to what are our values and how do you understand what internet is? I remember and I recall that the youth are restricted from accessing internet. They have their phones, but you tell them they have a time limit. And why do we do this? We don't tell them to have a time limit on books they can read. If they're accessing information, they can access it from any source. So it calls on us to redefine our value system and approach to internet. It is the long haul. It's a long-term approach, but it is necessary. Even in schools, we have teachers that are not digitally literate. And so they are not supporting in digitalization process, not because they don't want it, but it removes their authority from being the knowledgeable one, because now everybody could Google, everybody could access that information. And these are conversations that we need to start having simultaneously with the technological development. We should have also the cultural and normative discussion so that we change our perspectives and approaches to access to digitalization. The other challenge we have is when the government also supports or says that they're digitalizing their processes, but they're not contributing to critical digital literacy of those who are supposed to consume or to use the digital services. In Kenya, we have a very aggressive digitalization process by the government, but you find 80% of the population in the rural areas have no access to internet, and worse, they don't know how to even operate a smart device, so to speak. So how do they register on the eCitizen portal? How do they apply for a visa? How do they apply for their identity card and all those other processes? So this conversation should move from just the technological approach or development to also bring in the community, so that they can also talk about the policy frameworks. If the government says it is your right to access services, then it should be your right to also be taught and to be given access to the digital value chain, as it were.
Okay, so I think from my end, a quick just additional point to what Robert and Joseph were saying. For the school connectivity project, for us, we took it upon ourselves to make sure that since we have brought the internet to the school, we also bear the responsibility of teaching these kids about cybersecurity and the likes. And also the way our network is set up, we have divided we have put like some sort of levels or layers to the network. So there's freemium model where you can access text and pictures, and we have allowed what sites can be accessed. So when a student goes to the computer lab, we are sure that they are going to access educational content because we have blocked all other sites that are not educational. And also through our partnership with Cisco Academy, we are able to get the cybersecurity courses, and students and teachers are able to access those courses and educate themselves on cybersecurity. So I think as a way of ensuring that we are protecting this child and we're ensuring security in the school premises, that is the far we've gone in terms of cybersecurity. Thank you.
All right. I think if there is no other question, let's give them. Kuna swali?
Yes.
Okay. I think let me read. I'll read the question from Sandra. Professor Nolan and Catherine, thanks for the great work using existing community network structure in East Africa. How can we work together to improve the delivery of localized content on health, particularly around sexual reproductive health, and building capacity on social accountability processes civic education to ensure that this is delivered to the most remote areas of our society as they need this the most. That's Sandra Okech, Fuzudada Director.
Thanks, Sandra. And I go over to Margaret. Margaret, can you stand up? Margaret is a professor, as you all know, for public health. And I'm leader of Digital Global Health at the Center for Global Health at the University of Oslo. We have a program where we say we create digital output, and this digital output should come to the schools. However, that first means that the schools need to be connected. But we work together to actually bring the programs out such that health information should be a necessary basic human right and a public good, which is given to every student.
Well, this is impromptu. I'm engaged in a project where we are looking at developing content for health. So for instance, we look at issues of adolescent reproductive health. We look at issues of critical analysis, informed thinking about health issues. So we try to help young people to think critically in making choices about their health. So we have the content, and Professor here has the infrastructure. We're not connected yet, but I hope looking forward we can see how to bring the content that is needed out there and the connectivity that Professor is talking about to reach as many people as possible, to reach young people as possible.
So I suggest reach out to us, and then we see where we can build the Regional Competence Center to help you connecting, as we've done with Aheri, thanks Barak, and as we've done with UDSM and the Dar es Salaam Institute of Technology and the University of Dodoma and our other regional competence centers to actually help in connecting.
All right, thanks. I think they deserve a round of applause. Thank you. I think probably for the next, it's just a panel session. I'll request that we take up the seats up on the stage. All right. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, time for another panel session. And I think what a privilege to moderate this distinguished panel. 2 days actually on Wednesday, we had an opportunity as part of building partnerships to visit some local institutions, and among them the Nelson Mandela Institute. And Dr. Marwa took the opportunity to take us around the university over and above the conversations that we had. And indeed, universities are thinking out of the box, for lack of a better word. One of the things I picked, or one of the conversations I picked from the Deputy Vice Chancellor was governments are increasingly reducing funding to the universities, especially for public universities. And so they have to put in place mechanisms that will enable them to be sustainable enterprises or sustainable entities. So I know money is a key issue. Looking at majority of the participants who are in the audience, we're discussing all this, but at the end of the day, all this is only possible when we have adequate resources or when we have adequate funding. And this is part of the conversation why we are here building partnerships. I'm also just thinking back we had a very interesting conversation earlier about the role of the East African community and perspectives of locals on the East African community. And I recall, I think 3 or 4 years ago, I sat in a meeting at the Africa Union, and there were conversations on capacitating our regional economic communities or regional economic centers like the EAC. And as part of that, I came here for a meeting, and that's where for the first time I made contact with the Basic Internet Foundation team. And of course, the rest is history, because now we have good friendship between Aheri. It actually culminated into an MOU right away, which has led to the school connectivity initiatives and the many other things that we've been able to do. And I believe, hopefully before we leave this place, Aheri will have a similar arrangement with the Nelson Mandela Institute, quickly translating the ideas that we've had into action. And so as we discuss this panel, I would just start by first inviting thoughts from our panel. And as our panel intervenes, I would also like to ask the audience to prepare to also give some interventions on this topic. As government funding is reducing, what other alternatives do we have to make these ideas a reality? Because we are talking of translating these ideas into action. A critical component will obviously be money or resources. So as we come up with these good ideas, these good schools of thoughts, as our universities come up with incubation centers, as our universities go into production, and before I forget, I can see the instant porridge there, which is being produced at the Nelson Mandela Institute. That's subject for lunchtime. But as our universities go into production of such important solutions for the community or society, where do we look to for funding? So I think I will start with Dr. Marwa at the very end. Maybe in 3 minutes, you can give your perspective on the issue, and then we'll have Professor Kaseja, then we'll come to Professor Noel. I'll open it up to the audience, both the ones who are here and the online audience, and then the panel can then react. Over to you.
Thank you very much. By responding to your question, first, maybe I would like to respond by saying that whatever you want to be able to be successful or move forward with your mission or with your great goals, you have also to put your strategy on board. So with our maybe experience at Nelson Mandela, when it was initiated for establishment, the first thing that they had to do is building capacity to the lecturers so that they can be able to write projects, so that they can be able to attract funding. So into that, because that particular moment at the initial stage, we had a huge support because we're still emerging university so that we can be able to grow and be able to stand on our own feet. And at the same time, by attracting those projects, it was very easy now at the same time that when we have also some needs that we need to fulfill, we attach with the objective of the projects. So you'll find that at that initial stage, the sustainability of funding was also brought by the partnership that we had through projects. So you find that those objectives that we have, you find that we also address them or achieve them through our synergy of being together, that we address the issues in the project, but at the same time, we also address the issues that we have internally. For example, we also attract also scholarships through students, and you find that when also students come, they are supported by the projects, and you find that those students also addresses the issues that we want them to address as far as the strategic plan is directing us. And then at the same time, also another strategy, we had to create an endowment funding, though it's in process to also being maybe operationalized. It's not yet working right now, but the endowment fund, we had benchmarked in this other international university, through their experiences, they share that for us to be able to have the sustainability of funding, and if we want to also promote innovation so that we can have a very strong impact to the society, we have to establish an endowment fund. Now, having an endowment fund, also we had also to establish a business model so that we may be able to understand exactly that when we have those funds, how can we be able to allocate? Because you can have, yes, fund and support, but at the same time also utilizing those funds becomes a challenge. So we have also to go forward to establish a business model, which my colleague yesterday shared, whereby when we have those projects, we understand exactly where and how to allocate them. So you find that, for example, if we attract funds, they not only address innovation, but also they go forward to train students, to build capacity to the lecturers. So even if we don't have cash in hand, but at the same time you have that we also benefit on intangible benefits, whereby we grow and we build our internal capacity, and then at the same time also we increase visibility and then the strong image in a way that if we keep forward attracting more funding, you find that they'll still be able to come in. For example, also we engage with also this financial institution. For example, I can give one of the institutions is CRDB. They also support us in many ways because we have been there with them when we had begun the institution. We have an experience of 10 years. So they also support us in many different ways so that we can have the sustainability, not only maybe providing funding to support, but at the same time give us the financial knowledge on how we can be able to proceed and be able to establish mechanism of attracting funding. Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much for that insightful picture on what is happening at the Nelson Mandela Institute. I'll come back to you later on. You've said a lot of things, and I'm curious because normally banks ask for collateral. You've talked of CRDB, and I'm thinking as a university, because you're not necessarily a business enterprise, how do you present this value to the university or maybe to the partners that you've mentioned? We are looking at impact evaluation as well, but I'll come back to that later. Let's hear from Professor Kaseji.
Thank you. It's a big headache right now, just how to get funding, especially for learning institutions, because at the bottom line, if you're really doing serious training of students, it's unlikely you're going to have a surplus of money. Training is a very expensive endeavor, so one has to be very creative in how to keep that activity going with minimal resources. So I think one of the things we have to do as learning institutions is to refocus our priorities. Where is our money going to? How do we budget? We may have to let go some of those luxury areas in university operations just to survive during this difficult period. So what are our priorities as a learning institution? What do we have to do to maintain quality of education, to make sure that students are getting value for money? And I think that calls for hard decisions in terms of expenditures. Then we have to define what is our irreducible minimum in terms of an institution. What can we let go? What can we not let go? I know one of the issues is just human resource in higher learning institutions. We need to have qualified personnel, but those do not come cheap. How do we balance that in terms of our budgets? Then another area which I think universities may have to look at in a different way. We are used to writing proposals, but who funds those proposals? It's usually people from outside. It's usually the Western world. We write proposals to these other institutions, and somehow we hope that they will fund those initiatives. But right now, Europe and the rest of the world is having a difficult time just meeting their own expenses. So that kind of funding is also going to reduce. So how are we going to look inward, not in a selfish way, but look inward in terms of what resources do we have? What do I have on hand? What are the low-hanging fruits that I can still use without necessarily relying on external support? Yes, external support if you can get it, but what if it doesn't come? Are you going to fold up? No. So let's look at what resources we have. And as a learning institution, we have a lot of resources in terms of knowledge, in terms of manpower. I know the model of having interns. We have an intern here as Aheri who's doing an excellent job. How about broadening that opportunity for interns to learn, but also to provide that assistance in whatever we do? So that's one way of looking at our costs in a very cost-effective way. But of course, I'm not saying that we should not look for partnerships. Yes, we do. But even as we partner, we should not duplicate efforts that already have been carried out. Let's partner for where everybody knows their competitive edge. So you come together and each one contributes in a really meaningful way, not duplicating what others are doing, not competing, but working together in a synergistic manner. Thank you.
Thank you very much. As we come to Professor Noll, you've had the privilege of looking at this conversation both from the global north and the global south, and you can see the distinct disparities between the geographic zones. What's your perspective on the same? And maybe you could compare and contrast what has happened in the global north and what you're seeing, and probably what then stakeholders in this particular region need to be able to do to address the continuously diminishing funding gap. I'm sure Professor Chacha will also want to weigh into this later on, having been there when there's institutional structures for most of these key organizations like the EAC, where we are sitting or being set up. And now we are at a place where we have to, there are many papers that have been written, as has been said, but we have to think out of the box how to actualize some of those good ideas.
Thanks, Barak. My starting point, and thanks for the EU-Africa relation or differences. And thanks, Margaret, pointing out the war in Europe doesn't really contribute to have more funds available. And of course, it drives priorities towards food, towards energy. So we are really in horrible challenges. At the same time, what I see on the big investment market, I see companies are more and more driven by purpose-led. I see that what we previously had, where we had the CSR as a side product, we see now that more and more the purpose-led, the meaningful driving of a company goes into the DNA. So we have to find out where in the DNA of a company, of a medical company, is the interest in public health, is where we can touch into that. But having said that, so the first one is we need to understand where the meaningful for the companies is, where their purpose-led gives us an entry point as a university. Number two is we need to make our universities relevant for the society and for the companies. Because only when we make ourselves relevant, we will actually be able to approach the companies and the societies. And I just want to give you one example. In Norway, we recently introduced the master, which is 50% business paid, where we actually said that, okay, it's on technology systems, but it's like a number of companies going together, build the 50% capacity share funds, either by cash or by teaching or by hosting students. And the other 50% comes from the university to have a master education on that one. That's only one small example. The point number three I want to make is I don't think we at the universities have really understood the power of digital. The power which digital transformation can give us in reach out to others. And when you talked about collaboration, I really see that we don't have to repeat our resources, but that we should together form on the coalition of resources on digital global health, on education, on climate action, on other topics of youth empowerment, such that we can use the resources from each other and not seeing us as competitors in that scale. And really this transition to digital give us so many opportunities. We just need to grasp it, and we need an institution like Aheri to help us in making it relevant also for the communities. The point number 4 I want to bring up is exactly driven by the lack of resources. So the 20 research-intensive universities of Europe have joined forces as the Guild, as an association of universities with the Guild, and they have their Brussels office to actually be directly in Brussels to influence the public funding, to also ensure that base funding is ensured for basic research. And the Guild is working tightly together with Arusha. Our director and some of the Guild staff are now in South Africa in an Guild Arusha meeting to actually see how we can together influence the priorities for research funding. And the last example, which I want to bring up, is the model which ITU and UNICEF now use for school connectivity. They have introduced the model of pledges, where a pledge is basically making public what kind of contribution, either in money or in competence or in other goods, you are giving towards school connectivity and connecting the unconnected. And it's the Partner to Connect initiative of ITU who is driving that. And what they say, we have over 500 pledges worth $26 billion already now. And I give you an example, the United Nations University, which is present in about 14 countries, has also the pledge model, where they say, when we come to a country, that country first has to put $5 million in the bank. And the interest rates of that 5 million is the money which builds the core funding for the university to fund the stuff. And then the rest has to come through projects, to donations, to other things. Sorry, more than 3 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Professor Noll, for those insights. I would like to open up to the floor. I see Professor Chacha is ready. I see Catherine as well. Any other intervention? We'll start with Professor Chacha. Professor, you have the floor, and then Catherine, you will take it up as well.
I think for the African universities, we have a big problem. It's a problem based on the fact that the model of university structures and systems that we inherited and continue to plan and establish is a model that has not been able to be supported financially. We are very ambitious, so we expanded exponentially in the 90s and the 2000s in the continent of Africa. The university system expanded several times. Some countries running from only 3 or 2 universities to 100 universities. And we have not been able to inculcate what supports the university system in the developed country. For example, you rightly, Dr. Marwa and many of you, talk about putting or establishing an endowment fund. An endowment fund in some universities, for example, in the United States, if you ask how much money Harvard University or Yale University, where I went to school, has, to be more than the entire budget of a country in Africa, Kenya, one university. But the reason why they are able to develop and maintain such a base of funding is because of culture. They have, throughout history, inculcated the practice of philanthropy. Here, if you talk to very rich people in Arusha here, there have been very many billionaires here. Some of them have died and perhaps their properties are now being wasted. But if you had approached them to create an endowment in their names at Nelson Mandela University, they would have said no. But in the developed world and in specifically America, when a university approaches such a person, in fact, in some universities, there is an office that always visits people who are terminally ill and the people who are rich people to try and entice them when they're about to go away to meet their maker, to leave some of their wealth in universities where students can be sponsored and supported. So that one, we think it can happen, but it doesn't happen here. And I think the spirit of giving, even land, is not there in the African context. So we have tended to think that we can tell universities that, oh, go and establish industrial parks, go and run businesses, try to produce peanut butter, and quite a number of them are doing that. But that is not based on a structure that will grow, mainly because we are also poor. So even if Tom Mboya University in Homa Bay was producing the best peanut butter in the world, they are not going to be able to market, to multiply the production. And my thinking is that we need in Africa now to seriously consider the interface, the interrelationship between the academia, the university, the researchers, the chemists, the physicists, and indeed the industry, the people who can then be able to utilize that knowledge from the university done to patent by the university done, but then translate the patent into tangible products which can be sold. So I don't know, I think we have heard this song that university education is elitist. And for many years, especially during the last 15 or so years, we have been saying our curriculum should inculcate entrepreneurship skills. But even if I have skills of entrepreneurship, and I can therefore brag that I can sell anything, including human body parts, where will I sell them? Because there must be market. And the African economic base is not strong enough. And this calls to our attention, ourselves here, as scholars and researchers. Even those of you who are from Kenya, you have been claiming that right now with the competence-based curriculum, one can follow a trajectory in his education career of sports or fine art or drama. That is possible. in an economy that is performing. That is possible in an environment where people are cultured enough to partake. So that if you play soccer in UK or Germany, and your profession is to play soccer, the tickets for the whole year of your professional team are purchased by people who are able to purchase them. And therefore, the stadium is full. The amount of money collected by your team is a lot. They can afford to pay you a lot of money, and you can live happily as a footballer. Now, if you tried that in Arusha, at Sheikh Abed Stadium, there will be no person to come even to pay. Those who want to enter, they want to enter free. They corrupt the askaris there at the gate and enter free. So there is a mindset that we really needed to work on, and that's why perhaps our meeting here should bring to bear our relationship as scholars, as academia, with the common people and with the policymakers. Because some of the policies which we think are a panacea to our problems will never work. So if every student in Kenya now graduates from secondary school with entrepreneurial skills, what do they sell? And to whom do they sell? They will have the skills, yes. But our manufacturing base is very poor, and our purchasing power is not there. I think those are things to ponder about for the young tax, these young people who are in here. Maybe your minds will be more focused than ours, because for us, we have just been dreamers. And sometimes when you dream, you wake up, you realize you are actually in heaven, talking to God. But then you find that you are still in your bed. And you become very frustrated. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Chacha. Catherine, you have the floor.
Thank you, Professor Chacha. I think we are also dreamers as youth. Not only the old people, and I love this discussion because it's the first time I'm attending a discussion and we are speaking of funding mechanisms, because most discussions usually end on the technical stuff and papers being presented, but at least now we are discussing where does the money come from to implement most of these, I would say, impactful investments, as the title suggests. But so I'm reading through the tagline of the conference. It says building partnerships to support innovation. Then I'm thinking like building partnership to support innovation. So I'm thinking also in terms of funding, it's also the same. It's a similar cause. It comes from building partnerships as well, because most of our funding, I'm speaking from experience, has come from partnerships. You cannot, as the saying goes, if you want to go far, you go together. If you want to go fast, you go alone. Because for us, we have really aimed to go farther. That's why we have really sought of a way to build. To speak of what Professor Noel had shed light on in terms of the P2C, the partnerships to connect pledges that have been happening, I think, across the world, and the meeting in Rwanda as a whole. There's a missing link, from my perception, there's a missing link between now when we have all the pledges and all the key players pledging, how do we harness now from the pledges that were from the whole idea of the partners to connect. It was a good initiative, but now how do we harness from that? And I think it's also the ideology of the whole of the funders and the whole system of funding. How do people on the ground, where the innovation really is, the people who design these local innovations, how do they harness this type of funding? Because huge international organizations usually fund governments, and then you find the really local solutions, the one that benefits the local communities, never get funding. So there again, you have solutions that are copied and pasted, and most of the time you don't see these fundings that goes to governments. It's not, it cannot be harnessed by, let's say, youth. For us who are dreamers as well, have solutions for our communities. We are not able to access these type of fundings to really implement solutions that can benefit our community as a whole. And then again, when you come to funding for youth, I think I'm wearing now the youth hat as well. When you come to funding for youth, big organizations don't fund youth because they don't trust that youth can really deliver. I think most of what is given to youth is mostly capacity building. So we are constantly being fed with capacity building. And now I think it's about time we also get some share of the national cake of funding to also implement some of the programs and ideas that test us with also funding to see what we can do and how we can also impact or bring impact in innovation as a whole. So thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. I see one more. Please, there's a microphone on your desk. You can attempt to use it. Please go ahead. Introduce yourself.
Okay. I'm Sarafina Wilson. According to me, what I've come across, I need to add what Catherine was talking. What I came across is that we youth have a lot of ideas of whatever we are doing, whatever we are planning for the community or for either any program we are implementing to help the society or the community. But the big problem we are facing outside there is that sometimes there are people who can take your idea, you publish an idea out about something, and you need support from people who can provide funds, but at the end of the day, you miss the idea, and it was yours. You miss the idea because you don't have funds, and the funds are be given by other people who got organizations, foundations, so that's somehow it's difficult. And another thing what I know, it's we have got dreams, and we are working very serious. There are a lot of youth working very serious outside there. But what's the big problem? Our parents, and not only our parents, the elder ones, they don't trust us. That's a very, very big problem. They don't trust our abilities. What I've come across is that if I stand today and tell you what I'm doing directly, and I tell you my age, it's becoming very difficult you to trust. How can an 18-year-old girl do such things? So that's very difficult. So that's problems that we are facing.